Okay, in this video we're going to go over the binding system, how we bind our abilities to certain keys, and how we use object-oriented programming and principles and designs to accomplish this. If you didn't know, you can use OOP and LOU via tables and metatables. That's how we can accomplish that. Um, and so we'll jump into that a little bit in a second after we do this demonstration. So as you can see, we have our Stormbringer ability binded to our Q key, and we can change this to different bindings, right? We can change this to all these different bindings, or these slots with different bindings, right? And if we drag it out, we'll just go back to its normal one. Okay, and so just to test, as we just want to verify, this is working. We change our E key and we press E to activate the ability, which is cool. Okay, so let's jump over to Studio to see how this actually works. So I have the UI inspected here, and you can see we have a main frame. This is all under our power bar GUI, right? And so we have some slots here: ability slot 1, ability slot 2, okay? And you'll see each of these slots have some attributes on them. The icon paths, and really the important thing here is the key code values, which will define which key codes will be used to activate that slot, or the ability in that slot, right? And if you remember from our ability system video, we said that abilities are made up of module scripts and local scripts. So the ability local scripts will be slotted, will be parented to, yeah, they'll be under an ability slot, right? They'll be children of ability slots, and that will let them receive their binding key code. Okay, so we can swap this over, and you'll see it jump to ability slot 2. Okay, so that's cool. And you'll also see on this local script it has the same attributes as the slots, like in terms of the key code values here, right? They match up, and I also have some other attributes that we'll go into later. But so those are ability slots, and they have attributes on them which define which key codes they use. Okay, so there's some logic that has to go on to implement this, and so the first thing we'll go over is the binding class. This represents an actual key code binding, and this is where we can be introduced to how we do object-oriented programming in Roblox Studio, and that which is accomplished by tables and metatables. All right, so here we're setting up a table called bindings, and this kind of represents the class, right? Even really this here. Bindings is just a general class. Here's the ability binding class, really, this empty table. And you can see that we're going to be setting this up as a metatable. And you can see this here via this meta method called index. What this will do, will say, hey, any table whose metatable is me, if they don't have a property, look at me. Meaning, go up the inheritance chain and look at me for any properties they might be missing. Right, so if we index an ability binding for keybind, ability binding, a new instance of that won't have that property. No, not all instances will have that. This metatable, its parent table will, and that's where we'll really get this data and functionality from, if that makes sense. Okay, so those are tables and meta methods. Just a quick overview. They're powerful though, and we use those for object-oriented programming. So here in the ability binding class, we're setting up a keybind, right? We're setting up some key codes here. We're setting it as a key code. We're typing this as a key code, and some controller keybinds and actioning, which we use for the action system. We have an initialization function, which we'll use in our constructor to set up some details about the binding. This is really just to split up in our constructor. We don't want to bloat the constructor, so this is just a separate function that handles some details. It takes in a local script, the ability local script, and we'll do some things here. The most important thing it's doing is getting the attribute change signal. When it gets parented under a different slot, when this the local script, ability local script, gets parented under a different slot, its attributes are going to change, right? The key code bindings, and this is listening to that. To handle that, it's connecting that key code with the action service, which will say, hey, when this key code is pressed, action service execute whatever needs to be executed, and so we do that. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And here's the actual constructor we're using, .new. we're taking the, like I said, the local script and some other things here. So this is great. This is good work. This is the binding class, and that's really just handling all our bindings. And another thing I want to go over is the drag operations. Okay, so you'll see as we drag it, there's some logic that goes on to make this work as well. Now, Roblox has implemented some new UI controls, so this may be done differently now. But when I did this, those were not available. So this is how it was completed. We use a drag operation class, and this could really be thought as a singleton because it's only going to be maintaining one current operation, right? And we're going to do some cleanup things here because we're dealing with script connections, and we don't want to. When we're dealing with script connections, you always make sure to disconnect ones connections that aren't needed. So that's important, and we make sure to do that here. You can see this here in the headers. We have cancel and clean up current operation. We can dive into those. So a drag operation begins when we click on a slot, and we can start dragging it, and we can cancel it by dragging it out or putting it to the nearest slot. You'll see here some details. We have a drag operation completed. What happened, it was removed from its previous slot. It's removing the ability from it. We're not swapping it, meaning that if we had, let's say, an ability here, ground stomp in a different slot, and we move Stormbreaker here where ground stomp was, then it'd be doing a swap. The ground stomp would be moved over here. So this is saying, hey, that wasn't a swap. We're going to set the slot to nil and do whatever we need to do there. So the most recent one we did was added Stormbreaker to slot 1, and here are the key code values that are associated with that slot. Okay, so those are our drag operations, and we're doing some things here. It has some data such as the payload, which is the local script, the visualizer, which is the image we use for the drag operation. That could be anything. The previous parent and some other details here. So yeah, as you can see, we have some input-ended connections, like I said, some script connections that we're setting up, and in our cleanup, we're disconnecting these here. So we can go more in depth than that for a different video, but this is just a general overview of how all these systems connect to make the binding system. Ability manager is not too important just yet, but so here's the ability slot controller, which is listening to all our slots and handling just those listeners for when abilities are slotted to different ability slots in the UI. So here's the detail here. It's gathering all its children, and we're connecting to when it gets a child added, which would be that local script. And we're setting the attribute on the ability slot to occupied. We use that data. And we're doing a bunch of logic here. So if we should swap, if there's a current ability existing in the slot. This is really, it could be lengthy if I went into detail about what all this is doing here. It could be for a different video in detail. But essentially, yeah, this is how this is working. We have some functionality for swapping the icons when we go over to controller. If I could bring up the controller, I think I could start this. Let's see, with this, let's say device. I think I can change this to an Xbox here. And here's a emulator on my other screen, so I can show this, what the icons will look like. Right, so there we go. If we were playing on Xbox with controller, we could have these buttons instead, right? And here we go. If you ever play Champions Online, that's kind of how this works. This is working with like the bumpers or the triggers to activate these action buttons that you can press to activate the ability, right? So that's pretty cool as well. So that was a little overview of the binding system and how we can use object-oriented programming in classes to achieve different things, right? So that's that. Thank you for watching.